Good afternoon. My name is Tembi Wolf, and I'm very happy you're joining us for our last panel on the conference. I am a small woman wearing blue pants and violet shoes, and my hair is very short today because the last days I was wearing an afro and my grandma said it wasn't tidy enough. I'm very happy to be sitting here with the co-curators of this wonderful festival. I think that the last panel was a very fantastic, very inspiring segue to this last talk. We talked about tech and philosophy, expertise and imagination during the last days. We heard so many perspectives on technologies and their socio-political effects. We debated about artificial intelligence, of course, about codes and algorithmic systems in Europe, centering resilience and sustainability, and even as a non-techie, I was able to follow all of that and found it very interesting. Where do we go from here? We will talk during the next 40 minutes with the curators of the Future of Code Politics Festival. And you can, from now on, ask all the questions you didn't get to ask during the last days via either the phone number that is displayed to you in the stream, or you can, as has been said during the last days, step to the mic, please keep on your masks, and ask the questions. My co-moderator, Lorena Jaume-Palasí, is, as we say in German, swapping her hats or changing roles. She'll be on the panel tonight as one of the co-curators. I'm very happy to talk to. Maybe I'll introduce you a little, and then maybe you can tell a bit about your appearance. What you look like today. Unfortunately, we don't have joining us tonight is Suzanne Kite. She's one of the co-curators, but unfortunately she can't be here. We will be talking to Lucia Egaña Rojas. She's a Chilean artist who currently lives in Barcelona. In addition to her artistic practice, she also works in writing, research, teaching, and audiovisual production. And her work problematizes the relationship between high and low culture, high tech, lo-fi, public and private space, and the relationship between North and the South. She studied visual arts in Chile and did a master in post-pornography, which I find very interesting. Oh, okay. I'm very happy to have you join us tonight. You also are part of the Instituto de Estudios de Porno, Cooperativa de Técnicas Musea M.A.M.I, which you may know if you joined us for the panels during the last days. And at the same time, you're developing 2 research projects, and besides, you're doing embroideries, videos, and performances. That's a lot. Thank you very much for joining us. Also next to you, we have Fiona Krakenbürger. You may also know her from a talk yesterday. She's a sociologist of technology who lives and works in Berlin. She has worked as a manager for a lot of open source founding programs. And in recent years, you have worked around data, civic tech, and transparency, among others at the Open Knowledge Foundation and at the US-based Open Technology Fund. Right now, you're a program manager at the Alfred Landecker Foundation, and her focus is on promotion and systematic support of technology projects and mediated initiatives. If you're from Berlin, you might know one of the feminist hack spaces she founded, Heart of Code. And it's been over 10 years, I read, that you've been advocating for more diversity in tech development.
Thank you.
On the other side, we have Joanna Varon, Brazilian, of Colombian descent. and with a nomad's heart. Joanna is a feminist researcher and activist. She focuses on bringing decolonial Latin American perspectives in the search of techno-political frameworks, of shaping the development, deployment, and usages of technologies. To have company in that fight, she founded directress and creative chaos catalyst at CodingRights. That's a tongue breaker. Currently, she's a technology and human rights fellow at the Carr Center and a human rights, at the Carr Center for Human Rights Policy at the Harvard Kennedy School. And she's affiliated to the Berkman Klein Center for Internet and Society at the Harvard University. Joanna believes in believing in art, creativity, and coding as tools for revolution. Which is why she's co-created several creative projects, such as transfeministtech.org and Musea M.A.M.I, which you might also know if you joined our workshops during the last days. On our third side, next to me, joining us are Lorena Jaume-Palasí. Sorry, did I pronounce that wrong? No, okay. She's a consultant and scientist, and you probably saw her co-moderating during the last days, asking all of the questions. She is an expert of digital technology and ethics. Lorena works for the European Parliament and the European Commission and the government of her home country, Spain, where she's appointed to the National Council of Artificial Intelligence. She's currently involved in her own non-profit organization, the Ethical Tech Society, where she explores the question of how ethics and legal philosophy can be reconciled with digitization. She's also a co-founder of the Algorithm Watch Initiative and received the Theodor Heuss Medal in 2018. And last but not least, joining us is sorry, Lena. I forgot your.
I will just introduce
yes,
myself. Okay, I'm Lena Kollender. I'm a curator for this International Summer Festival, which is the framing of this festival within a festival here at Kampnagel. Since I work here since 2013. And I'm going to start by introducing myself, also my appearance quickly. I'm a white woman with short, dark blonde hair, and I have this brown blouse and a black top underneath and blackish jeans.
Yes, that's a good point. Maybe let's go the other way around.
We can also just I think once you start speaking, you can also just do it quickly for
introduce
the first
yourselves. Yeah,
I think
that's a good
fine.
idea. So let's start. We have had, as I said, 3 days of very intense discussions and a lot of learning. I heard a lot of people took so many notes. And one thing I heard from all of you in between the sessions is that what we had these past days was different from other tech conferences that you guys also attend. And I wonder what was different, and also as co-curators, what did you on purpose want to change from other conferences that you witnessed as people working in tech? You want to start, Fiona?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Fiona. I'm a Vietnamese-German woman with shoulder-length brown hair, black pants, and beige and brown seem to be trending. So I'm wearing a beige T-shirt today as well. Yeah, and white sneakers. So in the beginning, it actually all started with Lena asking me if I wanted to co-curate the program. And then the thing is, if I would have co-curated the program, I probably wouldn't have learned as much as if I hadn't then asked Lorena if Lorena wanted to join us as well. So, and then we even opened up the team, and we got Musea M.A.M.I, CodingRights, and Indigenous AI as well, and included them in the process. And so that was really beautiful. And I think for me personally, I definitely could see the result, which is there were so many more and new perspectives that I wasn't even aware of before. So I feel really, really blessed by the fact that different people joined us, not only participating and being invited, but actively shaping and curating the program. So that is, I think, pretty significant that there wasn't like one central instance that decided based on their own perspectives and possibilities what could be, and also based on their own limitations of what they know and are aware of, they would create the program, but instead we had so many different perspectives, and I think the result is really beautiful. And I think it was like this mantra of creating with and not for, and so on, and having diversity in the creating program also leads to more diversity in the program. So that's definitely different compared to other tech conferences.
Yeah. What did feel different during the last days than at other tech conferences?
Well, I think I don't have so much experience in tech conferences as Joanna has, but well, for me, it was really nice to see how this collective curation was like working so good together, without a centralized mind, like programming all. It was like composing a very complex and coherent image. So I don't know, Joanna, you have more experience with these tech conferences.
Jana, please.
Sure. Hi. Well, I'm a long black-haired woman, and now I'm in a huge screen, like a bit shy because I'm so big in the stage.
I love it.
But yeah, and I'm in Brazil, so talking from the middle of Mata Atlântica, couldn't travel because fora Bolsonaro, we need him out here. So I think, yeah, it was, as Lucia was saying, it was amazing how even though the program have different kinds of activities, dynamics, methodologies, there was a conversation going on with what Indigenous AI prepared, what we brought, the immersive workshops that we brought with M.A.M.I, with the Oracle, with Xenix. And now I have my head is like bubbling with a lot of ideas and thinking how things are converging. And for me, it was very special to notice that while the program was focused on code, on AI, on algorithms, but talking about social environmental issues was in the core of discussing the future. So for me, it was very important to have the different perspectives on this challenge across the whole program. So that was very different, I think, from other tech conference, I guess.
Yes, connecting code and algorithms and even issues such as the environment. That's something that doesn't only concern people of marginalized people of minorities that have been very present at this conference. Why aren't those discourses part of the mainstream, Lorena?
Because the mainstream is in the center. I think that marginalized communities have been speaking quite loud for quite a long time, but the mainstream does not listen because the mainstream only listens to the center. So that was also part of the conversation of decentering, trying to sort of be critical about looking at and realizing what is at the center, and realizing at the center it's white people and it's Western people. What is at the center as well? It's a specific form of power, a specific form of thinking, a specific form of standards that put actually the minority of the world as the default set in everything that we do. Because if we look closer, the majority of the world is not white, and the majority of the world is not a white cisgender man. Yeah. That's not the majority, actually. So that was important to sort of like try to mention this, try to decenter all those things by showing what other possibilities are there, and I think that it was I think it was who was it? It was one of the panels at the conference that finished. Yes, I think it was Vanessa Nakate who said, we need to listen before we develop any type of solution. And the problem is not that the voices are not being raised. The voices have been there the whole time, but we in Europe, we in the Western societies do not listen. And for me, that was part of the beautiful thing of having this situation where we just don't invite like tokens, like decorative diversity. Sarah Ahmed said once, diversity is a word that has become sort of eroded from its initial meaning. It doesn't mean anything anymore. It's like cosmetics that companies use to just show that they are diverse, because they just bring some people to work for them, but they don't change the structures. They don't put at the meaningful structure level where change can happen. They don't put people from other profiles, and that was, I think, part of the thing that was important for Lena and for Fiona and for me to say, if this is to be a diverse thing, we have to have it from the start, in the structure, in the budget. Every curator must have must have money for curating, must have money for inviting people, and they must make their own decisions. So it cannot be that we are telling them where to go, what topics to address, what formats. It must be them that they decide.
Yes. Lena, you've been there from the starting of creating that conference. On big tech conferences, they usually have reasons why they don't find women, they don't find people of color to be on the panels. You guys created a conference. I think I'm pretty sure mostly without white men. Yes, okay, entirely. How hard was it, and what's keeping other conferences from making space for voices like the ones we heard here?
It's actually not hard at all.
Okay.
Also, if you start with the right questions and initially start by first asking and consulting people who are not white cis men, and this is, I think, what we talked about before. We from the beginning, the first thing that we decided to do was to invite co-curators with a certain amount of budget and freedom, and not as guests on a panel or whatever, but like to bring super high-profile people like Joanna and Suzanne and Lucia, who are really working in this, to our team. And it's so if you start with that, there's no problem. So of course it's a problem if you start by making your decisions by trying to find the most, maybe by now known people or from the tech industry or whatever, and then you say, we need some women, some black people, some indigenous, maybe queer person on the and also it's a decision where to look for people.
It's also giving up power, right? Because you a part of the conference has been taken out of your hands and someone else has like...
I don't have so many experiences with big tech companies as well.
Okay.
You know, I'm working. I don't know how they curate, but I think it's also often happening via open calls. For example, I think there are also structures that work in a certain way. I don't know if that's true, but I think the standards that are set to measure who is interesting to invite or something are maybe a bit off from my perspective. I mean. Yeah.
Yes. This being the first conferences, or I read on Twitter that this is like a unicorn. It's one of the first. It's the first conference in Germany to reference all of these speakers, to tie together all of these issues, and to bring together all of these experts from different fields. I wonder. You guys, you're all experts in your fields. What was your learning? What was the thing that you maybe take away from this conference? That was the one thing that you're gonna be thinking about maybe tomorrow morning when you make your coffee, that's gonna be stuck with you. Short moment to think, and then I'm gonna ask Fiona, do you want to start?
There's so much, and I'm sure you'll all like jump in and add things. I mean, on a meta level, I think I learned a lot about how to organize this space, like how we can work together and how much different it is. And I mean, maybe I'm going to stick with the meta level, so to say. We've been talking about this before, but what I really, really loved about this conference is how we all like built so much on top of each other. Like I've never seen, like almost every single panel was referencing the others. So every single speaker was saying, hey, as Timnit yesterday said, as Vanessa yesterday said, as Jillian said.
And it's usually not like that?
I have never seen that.
Okay.
And I think it's great for the coherence in the space to like acknowledge that we are building on ideas of each other, appreciating that, and there's been just, I think, a lot of respect and appreciation for that. And I think that's linked to the second point that what I'm definitely going to take away from this is that it's super productive to tie those different social issues together. And we basically have it like with future code and politics. I would also add environment to the mix. Our fights are much more, like have more parallels and connections than we might think, and it's worth exploring that. And I think this conference has been a really good step. I know that there are different other events and spaces, communities that tie together those issues,
yes.
Especially environment, technology, I think, are becoming more prevalent here. But I think adding politics and feminism or queer feminism to the mix, I think, makes a ton of sense, and it might end up being us all fighting patriarchic structures that are hurting us all and harming us all, but it may be something else as well. But I think in terms of like learning from each other's practices, methods, skills, issues, the way that we frame those fights, I think there's a lot to learn, and I look forward to further tying these together in the future.
Lucia, what's your takeaway?
Well, I don't like to be considered an expert because experts
Sorry for that.
don't used to learn so much, so they know all. But well, for me, was very nice to hear all the conferences, the different situations, because I used to mix all too much. I think the people is constantly saying to me that I have this tendency to mix all the things.
How so?
Well, all these different layers of the world, you know, like codes, environment, epistemologies, arts, or whatever. And in this conference, well, I now maybe I'm more confident in this idea that all is really like interconnected in a way. So this is a very important thing to know and to be more sure that we are more people thinking this way.
So you're having more confidence in mixing things?
Yeah, I think all the things are really related, and the Western thought, it's like constantly dividing the things and saying this is not the same with this. This have any relation with this other thing.
Yes.
And I think all it's very related in a deep sense. So that was nice.
Yes. Joanna, is there anything that was new to you? Any question that you're going to ask yourself tomorrow waking up?
Yeah, the last panel with Kate, where she said space which is supposed to be the last common is now Bezos, Musk, and so on being privatized. I was like, oh no, now our fight's gonna be intergalactic as well. So more work.
What about you? Are you worried about the intergalactic fights as well, Lorena?
Yes, it's coming at us. It's quite clear. But I think as the artist at the Indigenous AI panel yesterday in the morning, Ben was saying there's nothing new under the sun. So I think it will be the same old fights under new disguise, but we will see very much a lot of the same patterns, the same isms, the same way of, as Lucia is saying, separating things to keep us distracting. And I think that that what this show, this conference today, is that a lot of us are coming from a place where there's this will of trying to look in a more relational way, trying to look at things and understand that it is all connected with each other. It's sort of like trying to, it's this very social way of understanding that we depend on each other. And it is, as Nettie said, it is not always about the self. And sometimes realizing about that, it's the best way to understand oneself as well. And I think that we heard a lot of fantastic women. By the way, we had 85% non-men. It was only 3 men in the conference. I think it was only 2 white people and, a white moderator. But it was really a different... I had to do the statistics because when I was announcing this in a newsletter, they were asking me those questions. And I was doing the stats and thinking, well, that's actually quite accurate with how the world actually looks like. And for many people, this is like the weird conference because it suddenly doesn't amplify something that is not the reality, but is being sold to us as if it was the reality. I mean, even when we talk, there's words like minority. What the hell?
Yeah,
minority is actually what is being taken as a default position.
Yeah, it's a global majority.
Yeah. So, but still, I don't think that it's useful to talk in terms of majority and minority because it's not about that. But it's about embracing differences and embracing everything. In other terms, and so I'm confident that seeing how many different cultures and how many different approaches to the world, understand that there is more than just capitalism, that there is more than just rationality.
Yeah.
And that this is part of our reality. And I think just looking at our descendants that taught us today in the panel that the future is going to be better in 3021, I have a lot of hope.
Lena, what's your hope and what's on your reading list, on your thinking list for the future?
On my reading list, well, a lot of things now. I'm probably the person who learned most here from the people here on the panel because I'm not coming from this field. But what I actually learned or also hope to learn in curating this already together with the others is that I can, with my tools as a, I studied literature and theater, and I'm working in performing arts, and I'm really much more confident now in approaching these questions with my tools, actually, because we talked so much about language and questions that I've asked myself before in a very different context. And I think what I had in mind when I first approached actually Fiona, then Lorena and everyone else was, I had a vague idea about how important it is to talk about algorithms, code, AI, big data and stuff like that, but I never found a way, for myself to address that in a way that was interesting to me. It was always like, yeah, I think it's important because it's such a big infrastructure, but, and now I understood that it's like totally relatable and super important. Like it's, and I hope that that's what happened to other people as well. And I think, I read most of the books that we were discussing here already. So my reading list is actually, I haven't read all the books of Nnedi Okorafor yet. So this is happening in my upcoming vacations.
And some of the books are only coming out in November.
Yeah, but there are some in, I haven't read all of the ones that she has out yet, so this is maybe.
That's an interesting point about, feeling invited to a discourse that's very elitist as well in its language, usually. Yes, please.
Oh, sorry, I didn't want to.
No, of course.
I wanted to just say something additionally to that and build on top what Lena said. I also want to honor you, Tembi, for moderating this, and I also want to honor everyone in this audience who doesn't feel like they have a tech background, whatever that is, because I think, if this conference has made anything clear, that this is not a technology issue. It's not a technology issue. Technology is prevalent. It's environment fights are not just an environment issue. You don't have to be have studied environmental studies to engage in this fight, right? But I know that technology can be so daunting, which I think is part of the power structures beneath, that it seems like an elite topic that is very exclusionary by default. And I think especially as people that don't fit into the stereotype of what a technologist is, it just doubles down. So I want to give that back. And I'm a sociologist by training, so I'm not a technologist by training either. But these intersections, I think, are inviting others who we desperately need in the space, and the fact that it has been so isolated is part of the problem. So if this conference has been helping and inviting more people to feel like they can contribute something, then that's already really amazing and a great outcome.
And that's maybe the main difference to the other tech conferences, because I've always been interested in these things, but I never felt like, this is kind of a performance that's happening in this field, You don't know anything about whatever. I don't even know what. So you cannot talk to us about these issues.
So for the next conference, did you make out any voices that should be invited next time, that need to be heard? This being a space where voices can be heard that might not be heard are other places? Joanna, if you, I can see your face. If you want to chime in, feel free. But otherwise, I saw.
She always has a delay.
Oh, a delay. Are you good? Otherwise, maybe Lorena. I saw you.
I have a long list of people from all over the world.
Maybe you want to go next then, Joanna.
If we get budget and the corresponding freedom, there's so many people that I think that need to curate and not only just be invited, but just be in the power structures that would create an event where all those things are being discussed. And I mean, there's people like Sabelo Mlabi in South Africa, who's a philosopher and coder, who's been writing amazing thing on these issues and translating across the two worlds, like the humanities and social sciences and the computational world. There's people like that are very much on the field, like Rediat Abebe, that has been researching how, for instance, open data initiatives, so-called open data for good or artificial intelligence for good, which are initiatives funded and run by European NGOs and non-profits and funds, are extracting data from Africa and are accessible to them, but are not accessible to African people. And she's been showing all this power asymmetries that we have in the field, and I think there's a lot of other people in South America and in Asia that have their own NGOs, and that they are small NGOs but creating really avant-garde work like the Musea M.A.M.I and CodingRights and Cenex, and I think those are the people that, ironically, because they are being most affected by this type of technology, know the vulnerabilities of these technologies so much and so well, and are very much the ones that are able to translate and show us how old fights are being transported into new vessels. So old fights about the land are now being transported to technology to keep on fighting about the land, because the whole intergalactic problems are going to be also land problems. So yes, there's this whole community of social, science and technology studies as a discipline. There's this whole community of gender studies, critical race theories. There's these communities also apart from academic disciplines, that are communities that are either fighting technology or using technology to fight, that have a lot of say and a sense of what technology is, even in a very practical way that is very necessary to include in this conversation, because this is a socio-technical issue, and there's no one that is excluded of the conversation. Everyone can say something about that, because they are partaking in that world. Even if you want to escape technology, you as a person are in the census of your government, your banking system is transacting and processing data about you. If you're at the streets, there's cameras, and that is also processing data, but you cannot escape the computational infrastructures that live in our world. Even if you don't have internet, even if you don't have a computer, you're still part of the whole data infrastructure that is being run. So there's a lot that everyone can say in that conversation, and I think this is also not only a question of who to invite, and what structures can you create so that this is a real conversation and not tokenism, where people from the global south are invited as a decoration. But it's also about creating formats that open more the conversation, even more than what we did the last 3 days.
That sounds like a
If I could
sorry, of course,
jump on that. Just one thing about creating formats and demanding more infrastructure for doing that. I would say include people that are non-English speakers, because that also makes a huge change on who we can invite, because many thinkers, inspired thinkers here in Latin America, in Brazil, will not speak English, but they are living technology, experiencing technology, thinking about technology in a completely different way than even us, who can speak and read what is being produced in English. So I think it's a gap that we need to merge. at CodingRights, we do a lot of digital security trainings with grassroots feminists, and what we learn from them, from their daily experiences, it's so rich that much more than theoretical thinkings that we can have also in academia or in civil society working on tech. That's there is a gap on class on that as well, and on and language expresses it.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
No, it's totally right. I think we should also acknowledge that this was a start in doing something like that, you know, inviting people to co-curate, but there's no translation to any language. We kind of try to make it accessible for people with different disabilities, but of course we didn't manage all the time as well. So there's a lot to be done to be really saying that this is it, like, well done, right? So it's just a start.
Well, that sounds like a promise for a future conference. And also like a responsibility to open the discourse even more for voices that haven't been heard yet and that haven't been able to participate and contribute. Maybe we can take that too, because we're approaching the end of the conference. Maybe we can keep that thought for. I have a last question for all of you. I wonder, maybe you can sum up, like, in 2 or 3 sentences, like very briefly, what does it take to change the future of code politics? If you could make a wish or 2 wishes in 2 or 3 sentences, what would they be? Do you want to start, Lucia? Do you want to need another minute to think? Okay, let's wait a moment.
I can give it a first try. Like, if I really make a wish and I try to be really radically thinking, completely exchange who makes the decisions about future technologies right now. Completely turn that upside down. Like, because it's so few, such a small, like, as you said, like a minority of this planet is determining what the planet is going to look like in the future. And I don't know, maybe have that, some version of that that hole opening up in the floor on February 19th, 2052. I have it in my calendar. So, you know, like turning the decision-making structures that we have right now that are like a pyramid, like the more you are on top, the more money you have, the smaller minority you are part of, but you have like even more power over so many more people beneath you in the pyramid. Turn that completely upside down. Have more people being involved in decision-making and shaping the future and policy-making, designing what things are supposed to look like and having a say in that. Yeah, that would be cool. That's something that I would like to see.
It does sound cool. Mm-hmm. Are you ready, Lucia?
Maybe. No, I think maybe we have to change this codification of the future itself as a linear thing, a progressive time. Mm-hmm. Maybe we have to change this idea, this linearity in the time, and look back and forward in a more chaotic way, not so organized, not so confident in this progression of the time. Some people are talking about queer times, queer temporalities. Other people are talking about that the past is the future, or that we have to like walk watching the past, like Zapatistas are also talking about this, and many people is like criticizing this time sequence, and I think maybe to think the future we have to stop to think in the future in this way. I don't know.
Lorena.
I agree so much with what Fiona and what Lucia just said, especially the idea of Wendy Chun was saying, quoting Rela Soleil, think about the past not of something that is behind you, but as a companion, something that goes along with you and that changes. And the same, I think, because the future depends on the past, as we heard from Nettie, that it's also very much related to what was in the past. You need to think also of the future as a companion. So the futures that you wish for are your own futures and not somebody else's. And realizing that perhaps the future that you are asking for is something that is going to be changing across time. What I'm happy to see across these 3 days, but also in the course of the preparation and in the years that I've been working on issues like this, is to realize more and more how many people, how many women, how many marginalized communities have been changing narratives, changing perspectives, theorizing, criticizing, putting examples. Like, there's a lot of voices out there that, and the time, my impression is ripe to amplify those voices. And I think it's getting more and more amplified. We see that the world is polarized, but I think that part of this polarization is happening because voices are being perceived and made visible that weren't that visible before. And that sort of is bringing conflicts, and that is problematic on one side because it's bringing pain, but on the other side it's making arguments more mainstream that were not that mainstream, that were not that seen. So in that sense, I think it's interesting to see, Hannah Arendt said once that what drives democracies and what drives science, it's finally not the truth, but conflict. And we're living conflicting times, and part of those conflicts is because suddenly those voices that weren't heard that much before are starting to be taken seriously. And I think that many of the things that were said by Musea M.A.M.I, by CodingRights, by Nettie Okorafor, by Indigenous AI, by Wendy Chun, all those arguments are gaining traction and are getting more and more respect. And that is what it takes, I think, to change the way how we code, how we do science, how we approach to each other, how we work with each other.
Lena.
Yeah, what can I add to that? Okay, so the time, linear time, okay, let's assume all of that is already done. Then I would maybe say that on top of that, I would wish for us to have a different understanding of what technologies can be and what they're for, actually, because it's all about efficiency and like progress most of the time. That's kind of relating to what you just said. But what Vanessa Nakate said in the first panel, actually, it's also a technology to educate girls in Uganda, in rural areas. This is a technology, you know, and it's not only about like high class, whatever, the fastest cell phone or whatever. It's about, maybe we should think about that in a more, also about what we understand as technologies in a more holistic way, and what do we want to achieve actually with them, you know?
Joanna, what does it take to change the future of code politics?
I don't know, I'm gonna go with what Lucia was saying. Like, the future is now, so we should not wait for it to come. It's already now. And I'll finish like this because we also don't have more time. So just think that the future is now, and and get accountable, responsible for the past. That's the past is also here. Ailton Krenak has this saying. Ailton Krenak is an indigenous leader from the Krenak people in these territories, and he says that the future is ancestral. So it's connected with what Lucia was saying. It's ancestral, and it's now. So I think we need to layer it up and take the responsibility to act on that daily, on our daily things, and bring those that need to change and what needs to be burned, so we change it.
Thank you so much. Those are beautiful and I think perfect last words for a 3-day conference. Aiming to change the way we look at code politics. We're thanking the ones who made this conference possible, the Allianz Kulturstiftung, die Nemetschek Stiftung, and Wikimedia, and the Heinrich Böll Stiftung, and especially the Gunda Werner Institute. Thank you so much for joining us on site and online. We hope you stay with the issue, you stay involved in the discourse. You're all invited to participate, as we heard in the last panel. And have a wonderful afternoon, day, or evening, wherever in the world you are, and from wherever you are joining us. Thank you.
Maybe also thanks to all the technicians, people here in the room making this possible, yes. This connection to the future and the past and the other parts of the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming.